Hi, this is Steve. Jumping in for a moment to let you know that while we prefer the Japanese audio with English subtitles, I actually use the dub version of the podcast because, well, subtitles don't play very well when you can't see them. But whatever version you watch, Akira is an amazing movie, and we had an incredible conversation with our special guest, Emma Fiffe. I hope you like it. Welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a voiceover artist, writer, and producer, and host over at Collider Video. Also the co-host of the Top 10, co-host of the Geek Buddies, and proud of my new one, The Deep Cut, over there on the Collider Conversations feed at Collider. Boom. That's my life.
And today, we are actually sitting at Collider. Is that okay that we actually reveal the fact that we are sitting at Collider?
Of course.
It's so...
After hours, we're allowed.
Collider After Dark.
No, God, no.
And we also have a very, very special guest today.
Yeah, she is the queen of anime in my mind from numerous experiences with her, and also following her on social media and hearing her talk about anime. She's definitely a incredible host and pundit in the world of film and television and anime, and you've seen her in the Schmodown. She has been a commissioner. She's been a manager. She is now currently in charge of the Patreon, but more than anything else, she's a very bright, vibrant light in our sphere, and we're very happy to welcome for the first time Emma Fiffe to the Cine-Files.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that lovely introduction and for immediately shooting down the idea of Collider After Dark. Because nobody wants that.
Nope. Nobody wants that.
I was already going to contribute to Patreon to see it, but
nope.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that we could potentially have a schmodown tier that's just like
true.
Just drinking Coors Light in Mark Ellis's living room with Molly hanging out in the background. People would probably pay for that, to
Molly
be fair.
being a dog.
Molly's a dog.
Sure.
Molly's a dog.
Sure. And the film we're doing today is 1988 Katushio Ottomo. We are moving into the world of Japanese anime with Akira.
Or as Emma once corrected me,
Akira. Yeah.
And one of the reasons that we're doing this, other than the fact that it is a groundbreaking film in many ways, is that it was a pick from our Patreons, including Jack Fraser and Rodrigo VM. Yeah. And I would love to hear why they wanted to hear the Cine-Files discuss Akira.
Hi, Steve. Hi, John. Rodrigo from Brazil here. Akira is a movie I first watched in the mid-90s. It was an overwhelming movie at the time. The visuals and sounds were so impressive. It stayed with me. It led me to the manga and to many repeated viewings. I learned to appreciate it even more with time. And I'm really happy to hear your thoughts in the next episode. Thanks a lot for picking it, and thanks for all the great work.
I was thinking a lot when I was rewatching this movie about the fact that it takes place in this year, 2019.
Good point.
And just thinking about the number of things that they actually got shockingly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that it came out in 88.
Yeah.
And it's 31 years later, and that is right now. Like, it is actually...
Yep.
This wasn't the reason that we chose to do Akira, but it is definitely kind of cool.
Yeah.
Totally worked out really well.
By the way,
creepily so.
How many more futuristic, post-apocalyptic horribleness movie things have we yet to get to? Because we've passed Back to the Future.
Sure.
We've passed Terminator. Like, we've passed Blade Runner this year. I think this year's also Blade Runner.
It is, yeah.
You know, so, like, are there more that, like... I mean, we have Blade Runner 2049, I guess.
I guess we've got that to
if I live that long.
Yeah. Well,
there definitely are. And the thing that's interesting about Akira, and that is very sort of typical in terms of Japanese storytelling when they do post-apocalyptic kind of stuff, is that yes, there was an apocalypse, but also we rebuilt and like society still exists. I mean, that's the thing is that, within certainly in Blade Runner, which certainly I think has some similarities with Akira in terms of like how 2019 is portrayed, this sort of weird mix of what we know, what they knew to be true of like city living in the 80s with some, more advanced technological things sprinkled in. But, in Blade Runner, there's not supposed to have really been an apocalypse. They're just like, we just started making human replicants.
Our world just kind of
This
sucks.
is just the way that things evolved, whereas in this film, and the source material of the manga, of course, as well, like it's a city that's been rebuilt, like they're in Neo-Tokyo. So, and again, like a lot of that comes from the fact that like Japan actually had an apocalypse and had to rebuild.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you first came to this film?
Oh yeah. So I want to say I probably saw this movie when I was 14 or 15 for the first time. And we had it on Laserdisc. So this was in my like.
So that's the Criterion Laserdisc?
Yeah, I mean it was the best you could get at the time.
Absolutely.
Certainly. But yeah, I was like deep into my anime obsession years at that point, and my dad had this movie on Laserdisc, and so I asked him if I could watch it, and he said okay. And so I think I watched it by myself probably the first time. We had a room over our garage that had like a screen that came down and a projector. It was our media room. It was our room for like watching movies. Basically.
You had no idea what you were getting into?
I had a little bit of an idea what I was getting into. I think I already maybe owned the Todd McFarlane Kaneda figurine that came with the bike and everything. Yeah. Again, I'd seen the imagery of it. I used to go, when I was a kid, I used to like go through our Laserdiscs and I would just like pull all of them out because they're the size of records.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So these
huge.
Big, very visible artwork on the cover. Yeah. And so I'd seen that cover artwork so many times. And again, this was during an era as well where I would literally, because it was like early days of TiVo, which was, sort of your DVR predecessor. And so I would go, because I knew they showed anime on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I would literally go through and look in the credits on everything that was upcoming for names that sounded Japanese in the production crew, and I would record it.
Wow.
Because I just wanted to watch more anime. But yeah, so again, we owned Akira, so I watched it, and I was very disturbed by it. And then I have this weird feeling like maybe it got a limited theatrical release at some point down the line, because I feel like I saw it in the movie theater, but I had already seen the film at that point, because I've certainly seen the streamlined dub, which was the original dub, which was which they aired on Sci-Fi Channel, and which was on the Laserdisc that we had, and then not long after I saw it in Japanese with subtitles, and I've seen the
new dub,
the Pioneer dub. I want to say is the other company that did it, with a lot of sort of typical voice actors that were working at the time. A lot of Digimon voices in the newer dub of Akira.
Do you remember how you first came to it?
I think it's a jumbled mess for me, to be honest with you. But I remember I collected the comic books, so I was reading all the Akira comics like in the late 80s and 90s and stuff. And I don't remember if I saw it on videotape or I went to see it in DC as a kind of like one of these things like, oh, I got to see this movie on a screen. So I don't know if it was one of those limited releases that they did or what have you, but I remember that when I saw it, I had never seen anything like it before, and it changed like my perception of this idea of animated films and what they could be. And so, and the material as well, because I was probably 19 or 20 when I saw it for the first time, when it came, when it was out. And so to me, I was just blown away by what this was. And I had, of course, because it was a condensing of the story as well from the comic books. Yeah, massive. Yeah, all the collect. It's like Lone Wolf and Cub. Yeah. You go back and watch those Lone Wolf and Cub ones from like the 50s or 60s, but like you look at but I collected all those issues, and it's just a combination of the adventure. So I just remember that it put the hook in me good, and I've never let it go. I've always loved post-apocalyptic futuristic films, and Blade Runner and this one were the two ones that really got their hooks in me good, and have always been my favorites of the genre ever since.
So for me, we always tell these stories at the beginning of how we came to a film. I've been waiting to tell this particular story for a long time, which is in 1989, I was in college and working at a comic book store. And 89, of course, is the year of Tim Burton Batman.
Yes.
And so a lot of big things, a big time for comic books. And the first Japanese comic I ever read is Lone Wolf and Cub because Frank Miller was like my hero at the time. My opinions about the current Frank Miller maybe are a little bit different than they were, but he was anything he said, I was going to go read. And when he did the covers on those Lone Wolf and Cubs, I picked them up and I'm like, oh my God, these are amazing, which they are.
Yeah.
And then someone said, well, you got to see Akira. And it was just when I think it's Epic was coming out with those comics in the US. And I started reading them. And the comics absolutely blew my mind because there's nothing like that in American comics. And the levels of design and the kind of story they were telling and the ambiguity and the complexity and the violence and all of the stuff was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah. And then the comic book got canceled because the company went bankrupt. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I have to know how this thing ends. Like what? And then because there was no internet then, there was no way to find stuff out. And then I hear, through the comic book geek grapevine, well, there's a movie. The movie's just gotten made. And we said, well, how are we going to get a copy of this movie? And we had a friend of a friend of a friend who got a bootleg copy on a VHS dub with no subtitles who had just gone to Japan. So we go, okay, we're going to watch it. And all of us gather around because we'd all been reading the comic book. And we go, well, now we're finally going to understand how it ends and what this movie means. And we put the movie in with no subtitles, no anything. No. It's all in Japanese. And we watch it. And of course, we get to the end of the thing and we go, what the hell is that? And then we go, damn it, I don't know how it means. And then we hear the rumor that they're going to finish more comics are going to come out. And so then 5 more comics come out. And I read those 5 more and it isn't the entire series. And I go, well, I still don't know what it means. I don't understand. I still don't understand. And then at the UC Theater in Berkeley, which is where I watched all the Kung Fu films, and they would have foreign films and stuff like that. They go, oh, we're actually going to see the American release, which was, I think, the dubbed version in 89.
89, yeah, that's right.
And we go, okay, we're going to see it, and we're going to finally understand what this is all about. Of course, we go to see it, we get to the end, and it was in English.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I still didn't understand. It's and it was funny. I hadn't watched it in a long time. It's been 15 years probably since I watched the movie.
Yeah.
And I watched it, and it is just so overwhelmingly fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
The level of detail and design and ideas in this film.
Well, because they basically got the green light to start making this film. I think that he was approached about making the film in 83 and the comic started in 82. Yeah. So basically, Katushio Ottomo, who's the creator of Akira, basically he'd been writing this manga, and he had another manga that I think is just called Apocalypse that they had also made an anime version of, and it went horribly, terribly wrong. He was really, really unhappy with it. So basically he was approached about doing this film, and he said, okay, but I basically have to have 100% creative control because he was so unhappy with the other project.
That's so crazy to me. I don't want to make the Orson Welles comparison because that's kind of ridiculous. But for a guy, he had my understanding is he had done character design on one other film before this. So he's been which is obviously takes a lot.
Sure,
and he's the total creator of this comic, and then he gets complete artistic control, final cut of his first feature.
Yeah,
and you could see what a genius he is.
Yeah.
That he deserved it.
And it's crazy too because at the time in Japan, it was a very affluent time in Japan. People just had, especially the studios at the time, which is so different from now, where the working conditions are so awful for animators in Japan. But they had so much money that basically there were 10 companies or something that basically had a stake in this.
The Akira Committee.
Yeah, and they had I want to say a budget of $10 million or something in 83, which was a lot more money at that point.
My understanding, most expensive anime up to that point.
Oh, absolutely. And by far. And just a lot of how this movie was made was very different from the way that most anime is made. To this day, even, obviously at the time everything was hand-drawn, and they had to invent colors for this movie because the company that they got paint from to do the to paint the cells, because again it's all hand painted, there weren't enough colors for them. Like they wanted more colors for this movie.
That's amazing.
And yeah, so and the other thing that's there's two things that are really, really unusual about this film. And it's much more. One of them is how they do Western animation, which is that all of the voiceover is recorded ahead of time,
right?
And they basically animate to the dialogue. That is not standard in Japan. Like,
do you know why? Because I read this. I never knew this.
Yeah.
Do you know why they don't do it the way? I don't know. It seems so much harder.
I genuinely do not. I do not have the answer.
Is it voice match? Do they voice match?
Yes,
Do
they
animate
ADR
first.
themselves, basically.
That makes sense.
Yep.
That makes sense to me.
Well,
in
you
the
can
Eastern
see-
philosophy.
Why?
You are in service of the piece. The piece is not in service of you. And so
Actually, that's a good point.
Right? That makes sense to me. You
Yeah.
will conform to the piece. The piece will not conform to you. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think too that it's one of those things where, as you say, like that is in terms of Eastern philosophy, it makes a lot of sense. And on top of that, it's like Japan at this point is already so at the point that they start getting into animation, they're already so used to taking Western properties and dubbing them for a Japanese audience that I think that they just thought, well, this is the way to do it, and it just kind of stuck, and that's how it is. Now it is different in Japan in that they do group records, which they don't do in the States typically when you're doing ADR on something. You're very much isolated in a booth by yourself, just matching the mouth flaps. But in Japan, they do actually do group records, so they are able to play off of one another, but they are also trying to match the flaps. But that was not the case with this film.
Yeah.
Right. That to be clear, for this film, they actually did it what I would say was American style,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
recorded all the voices first.
Yeah, exactly.
One other thing I want to talk about before we get into the movie, and normally I try to figure out, well, where are we going to talk about this and where are we going to talk about that? The soundtrack of this movie is so unbelievable to me. And I have a story about the soundtrack too, which is that when I was in film school, basically there were 3 soundtracks I went to when my movie sucked and I needed something that would make it automatically better. And they were like the greatest student film music I ever had. And the 3 soundtracks are Ennio Morricone, well, that name didn't come out of my mouth at all, Morricone's soundtrack for The Mission.
Oh, The Mission's great.
Peter Gabriel's Passion for Last Temptation of Christ, and Akira.
Wow.
This movie, the sound, and it is so unusual. And I always knew it was unusual sounding, and I didn't know how unusual it was made. It was made, first of all, the soundtrack was entirely recorded before they made the movie.
That was my next point, was that also the soundtrack was recorded before the movie was made.
That's great.
And the way they recorded it is so the group is how do you say it? Geino Yamashiro Gumi. And it's Shoji Yamashiro who is the guy. And this is this group that is this avant-garde musical group that traveled all around the world. And Ottomo had heard recordings of them from Prague, I think, although it's a Japanese group. And he said, okay, I want you guys to do it. And what they did to make this music is crazy. First of all, it gathers musical instruments and styles from all over Asia, including traditional Japanese things, the taiko drums and the voices, but also a lot from Bali and Indonesia and Malaysia, traditional instruments. And they used a Balinese scale, rather than like the 8-tone scale that we're used to, or there's a 12-tone scale and a 16-tone scale. This is some traditional scale, and they wanted to be able to bring it all into computers. But none of the computers with the MIDI at the time are written for that kind of scale. So they actually had to rewrite all of the software for the MIDI in order to use this scale.
Crazy.
And then what they did, and this is what is so cool, in addition to bringing in, they had everything recorded traditionally. So when they're recording taiko drums, the particular drum group that they used are dressed up in deer suits, and they have weights and straps on their body to make them heavier, because the idea is that the tension of the weights changes the sound of the music. And so they actually – and normally you go like, well, that's what you do for performance, but you wouldn't wear the deer suit in the studio. Oh, no, they did. They did wear the deer suit. They had the guys from Bali with the 300-year-old percussion instruments. They had people – they were recording voices in a huge, huge symphony hall, and they put them up on the stage, and they went and the guy, what's his name, Yamashiro, didn't like the sound of it, so he moved them up into the balcony to record it. And then what they did, and this is what just blows my mind because it is so different from any way I've ever heard of a movie made, was they make it all modular. So they take each little piece and they separate it out in the computer. And so it's not that they just handed the filmmakers the music.
Yeah.
Is they handed them all the stems essentially of all possible things so they could mix and match and fit all these pieces together. And it's like the antithesis of John Williams.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Because John Williams is like, here's the leitmotif for the arc, here's the leitmotif for Indiana Jones's hat, here's the love theme, here's Vader's theme,
Yes.
and it will go here and it'll be this long and this is what it is.
Yep.
And this is like, here are all these
Here
pieces.
are all the components.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Amazing to me.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it's astounding
Crazy.
music.
Well, I watched it for the first time ever with the Japanese audio for this podcast because I got the Blu-ray and I looked it up on I went on the internet. I was like, which is the best way to watch this movie? Is it with the English dub because it's how I remember watching it,
Right.
or with the Japanese dub? Because with Batman Ninja, the English subtitles and dub match each other, but they don't match what the Japanese is saying half the
Correct.
time.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're like, well, what is the real story of what's happening
Yeah.
here? And I can't believe in 2018 that they would do that. Like, dub the Japanese. What's the problem?
Yeah.
So I was concerned about it, what the right way to watch is. And when they said watch it with the Japanese, with the English subtitles, that's the best way to go. And you put on the 5.1 surround sound of the new Japanese update. Holy crap, it's incredible. And the music is so beautiful. And you hear things you hadn't heard before. So it was almost like rewatching the movie again from the beginning for the first time. And I was so blown away by that. So yeah, if anyone's listening who's wondering how to watch it because the music, which is what you all were talking about, is even more vibrant on the Japanese 5.1 surround sound.
Well, speaking of watching the movie, shall we enter into the world of Akira?
Let's talk about it.
So we open not over Neo-Tokyo, but over Tokyo in 1988, and the camera is flying over the city, and we hear the sound of wind and the dissonant music, and we hear that this is July 16th, 1988 in Tokyo, and then we see the explosion. And again, right here, you see this clarity of design in terms of how this is done. This black and white, spherical shape, and what sound does that explosion make? None. Silence. That to me right there shows a filmmaker who really knows what he's doing. I totally understand why this guy knows images. He's been drawing great comic books for his whole career. Yeah. How does he know about sound?
I think that again, it kind of goes back to that haunting understanding that the Japanese have about having to deal with a total destruction like that and dealing with it and sort of the weird quietness of everything being destroyed.
You know what I didn't look up? Do you know what year he was born?
I don't.
So he was. I know he. He had to be
Ottomo-san. He was born in 54.
54. So
Yeah.
long after.
Yeah,
so he heard the
after.
stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And we cut to a blinking bar sign and a guy with skinhead and a little bit of mohawkiness going down into this grungy, dingy, underground bar. I had never in my life seen anything animated that looked like this.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember for myself in terms of when I watched this, if it was that speaks more to the body horror stuff, though, which is later in the film. But yeah, I feel like and again, I was somebody that was watching a lot of anime, so I felt like, I am used to these animated stories being for adults and not necessarily for kids.
Yeah.
So I'd certainly seen things that felt, I think, stylistically similar, because I think at this point I would have already seen Princess Mononoke, where you've got all kinds of weird demon stuff happening, and again a mature tone to it, but not like this specifically, though. I don't know. There's a lot of space anime where they go to seedy bars that look a lot like this.
Sure. But I hadn't seen, this
Yeah,
is 89
for
and
sure.
I hadn't seen anything like
Totally.
this.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think the Blade Runner comparison is there's so much of that
Truly
world.
is unbelievable.
I think also the Ronin, Frank Miller Ronin graphic novel is a direct comparison to it's all around the same time.
Well, and this is because we'd have to call up Frank and find out.
Yeah.
I'm sure he read Akira before he did Ronin.
Probably.
Ronan's before Dark Knight Returns, so it's 85.
Right.
yeah.
I mean, he had to. Boy, we know he was reading Lone Wolf and Cub,
Right.
Because there's no Ronin without Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah.
I bet he had read this too, because so much of the design principles, and I haven't read that in a long time. I should
Ronin?
read it again. Yeah.
Every year, once at least every year. It rivals Dark Knight Returns for me because of the technological aspect of it all and what it means, and the samurai thing, which is massive.
Well, and the thing with Ronin, and this is not the Ronin podcast,
Right.
is it is really ambiguous about exactly what's going on.
Yes.
Very much like this
Akira.
film.
Yeah.
And there we see Kaneda at the jukebox wearing that red jacket with that pill on the back. Is so iconic.
It really is. Yeah, the fashion in this movie is great.
Yeah.
It's like, again, it's all clearly they didn't update their style too much from the between 88 and 2019, but you know what? That's also accurate.
Well, and that's all science fiction. I mean,
Yeah.
all science fiction, you can see the years that
They
what
were
their
made.
vision of their future
Yes,
is.
100%. Yeah.
And some other gang members come in and scare that guy at the bar, and then we see Kaneda playing with the jukebox, and that CD goes down, and we hear that the clown gang is out there, and we head out into the alley, and we meet Tetsuo, who is playing with the bike.
I know. Poor sweet Tetsuo. He doesn't know what's coming.
Full speed nerd rage Tetsuo.
I know.
I know. It's all set up right in this moment.
Yeah.
And I believe that might be the coolest motorcycle of all time.
Yeah. I mean, listen. The coolest motorcycle of all time certainly exists in some sort of Japanese media because it's either this or it's Cloud's bike in Final Fantasy VII. Like, there's no.
I'd like to throw the original Tron in there as a contender. Probably won't win, but that's a great light. Those light cycles.
I think
The
that
light
is a
cycles are
really
cool.
important design.
Yeah, they're really cool.
We can throw Henry Fonda's bike in Easy Rider in there.
Sure.
No, Peter Fonda.
Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's
Henry Fonda on
a lot of
Harley.
Fondas out there.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fonda. I know you just passed away. I feel bad that I disrespected you.
No, I was
actually Henry's probably more pissed about it than Peter.
Well, I was going down the road of like, when did Henry Fonda do a biker film? I was
Sorry,
like,
Peter
so
Fonda.
Excited. Yeah.
By the way, something else I didn't know.
Oh.
These were his favorite movies. Katushio Ottomo's favorite movies were Bonnie and Clyde, Easy Rider. He loved Woodstock. And it's like, what are these films? These are rebellious youth films.
For
like,
sure.
there's so much Bonnie and Clyde-ness in this movie in its way.
A little bit. Yeah, I totally agree.
And out comes Kaneda. He's not having Tetsuo playing on his bike.
I know. Yeah, he tells him he can't even ride it because it was made specially for him, and Tetsuo can't handle it.
The disparaging of Tetsuo throughout this film is so horrible.
I know, but I think that one of the things that the movie does really well, because I think that any time in terms of adapting a source material, and this is across the board, like this is not just manga to anime, like I think that all the strongest ones, the thing they do extremely well is take out some of the plot and shift the focus to be on the relationship between the characters. And while I think that this film, like, I don't want to say suffers, but doesn't give you enough of some of the characters that appear in the film, that is not the case with Tetsuo and Kaneda. Like, you really get their relationship right off the bat.
Yeah.
Totally. And so I tried to reread the comic book for this recording. I got 10 issues in. That's as far as I got.
Yeah.
Here's the big thing. There obviously there's so much more. It's a huge,
for
gigantic
sure.
story.
It's massive.
Kaneda is way more of a horrible person in the comic.
Yeah, he's kind of like
He's awful.
Oh, he's horrible in the manga, but in the movie, he's sort of just a dumb boy.
But what's interesting is in the balance is because, if you remove this scene and his, really disturbing moves on girls and all of if you remove some of the violence and the squirminess and all that stuff, he becomes so much more of a hero in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because you take out all those negatives and then we're going to get to some badass moves from this guy.
Well, this was what I enjoy. It's not clean. These
No.
relationships,
Yeah.
that's what's enjoyable and very mature, right?
Oh,
is
for
that
sure.
they're, although and you find out later, because in retrospect, you can put it through that prism as well, that they grew up in a state school together, so they weren't a foster home or whatever it was. And so that you're going to develop a harder edge. Connecting to people is not as easy. So they do all have a you could say a love for each other as friends,
Sure.
there's still a hierarchy even within the friendship. Everyone's got that alpha dog or whatever in their friendship groups and whatever, and Kaneda is that, which is why although he saves Tetsuo from being beat up by other people, he also will step on Tetsuo when it fits his needs, and he does it here.
Well, frankly, throughout this entire film, we are not, in my opinion, going to find consistent goodness. There's no way to know. Like even when you watch it the first time, you're like, you have no idea. But even on subsequent views, you're like, well, should I be rooting for that person?
Yeah.
They're they believe that they're right.
Sure.
But who knows what's right?
I found myself connecting with the Colonel more this time around as an older man, and I was like, because I used to hate the Colonel in the manga and also in the movie when I used to watch him as younger. So identifying with what he's trying to do, you're like, oh shit.
Well, I mean, we'll hold off on it because we're going to get to so much more of this stuff. Because right now we are building the tension to go on a ride, to go fight the clown gang. And I'm telling you, when he revs up that bike and those lightning things go along the wheel and that music starts to build and you hear the beginnings of this mix of traditional percussive sounds with super modern, almost techno-y rhythms, and you're like, wow. And they take off and we have those light streams coming off the back. And this is all these ways that anime does things and Japanese art does things that we never did.
Yeah.
That's just like very unique to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found myself, especially in rewatching it, going, man, I was right about this movie the first time I watched it, because I felt very much like there was stuff that was happening in it that could only be animated, and this is a prime example of something that's really taking advantage of its medium.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we go into the city, and this is where you get the full Blade Runner with the giant holograms and all that stuff.
The exact thing is during the motorcycle chase, I went, man, this is so LA Blade Runner.
and there's the shot of we're at an intersection, some cars start to pull off, and we're at a high angle, top down, and we see the cut closer to the car, and the guy slams on his brakes because those motorcycles come by, and then you're inside with the driver, and the big wrench or whatever it is smashes through his windshield, and he dives out, and someone throws a grenade or something in there and it blows up, and I go, what the fuck is happening?
I know.
Like, what kind of movie am I in? Who, again, and at this moment, I think those are the clowns that actually do that, not our guys.
I believe so.
But I don't really, you're kind of like, wait, what's happening? Yeah. Is this good? Is this bad? Yeah. And then we're inside a restaurant with some people.
Oh, yeah.
And man, it's like some couple that's out on date night or whatever, or flirting with some girl, and suddenly the waiters and everybody else start scrambling, and a motorcycle with a clown gang member comes through that window and hits the ground and slides forward with his clown head face coming right into the camera. A, it is a spectacular shot. B, it is exactly in the comic book, and that's where you see, and you know what it reminds me of, actually, in a weird way, not that the movies are anywhere similar, but is if you read Frank Miller's 300 and you watch 300, there are shots where it's like, that is exactly in the comic book.
Certainly the wolf shot's exactly in the comic book.
Exactly.
When he goes up as a teenager,
Yeah. Tetsuo is chasing a clown, and there's just a beautiful side shot of Darling with the rider, and you see the debris flying through the air.
Yeah.
It just is a remarkable, remarkable shot. And then we cut to, we're going to see the head clown guy riding that big chopper, arms crossed.
Arms crossed, so good.
And we hear this music that has, and now we hear this breath music that's doom, doom, and it sounds like nothing else. And then coming into the shot, jumping over a wall and landing into frame, which reminds me of Arnold in T2 jumping into that canal. It's the same kind of shot. And a guy, one of our gang members, jumps off the sidecar with a giant wrench weapon thing in his hand, lands on the front of the motorcycle, swings down, tries to hit the head clown, who then grabs him by the face and headbutts him. And we're in a world now, it's anime, of speed lines, with all the backgrounds have dissolved. And in slow-mo, he goes off of that thing, falls in front of the motorcycle. It goes over his arm. Whew.
Yeah.
Again, I'd never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And you know what it reminds me of is a movie we just did recently. It's Road Warrior.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was kind of thinking that I was getting this has a little bit of a Mad Maxy sort of vibe
totally.
to it.
Absolutely.
This element, particularly the clowns.
Yeah.
And now we get chicken between the clown boss and Kaneda riding right at each other. Speedometers going way, way up, and then they pass, and clown goes down, and Kaneda with this perfect, coolest skidding stop on that bike.
Yep.
You're like, oh, this guy's cool.
He's cool. I don't know if he's morally sound.
Oh no! Tracking what his motivations are is a really weird thing.
It's very strange.
Very strange, particularly when we get to I am trying to save my friend, kill my friend, save my friend,
Yes.
kill my friend. Also, that girl I like.
Yeah.
Cops are coming, and we all bug out with light trails. We're in a shaky POV camera. There are dogs barking. There's riots. There's protesters. We're in a part of the city that has just gone crazy. And there's a man in a coat, and there's a strange-looking kid.
Oh, yeah.
All right, yeah.
And the kid, what I love, too, is that the kid looks back and sees that behind them is a trail of blood. And again, because we like to talk about filmmaking every once in a while, you have a choice. You're a filmmaker, whether or not you're shooting a real film or an animated film, to go like, do I do an insert or do I do a POV shot? So much more powerful in this situation to do the POV shot because you have the kid's reaction to the blood. I know that's a small thing. And they stumble through the traffic jam and they get out into the middle of this protest where there's stuff about – because the other things going on is this city is falling apart. People – there's religious fanatics, there's protesters, there's terrorists. And this bleeding man and the boy get through the crowd. They get spotted. They're in the lights. He's trying to get the kid to go away. He shoots out one of the lights. They open fire on him.
Hold your fire! He's got a kid!
And it is bloody.
It is.
And he tells the kid, you got to go find Ryu or something like that. And then the kid won't leave and they wipe him out. I mean, they just machine gun fire. It's Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
Yep.
Total.
Yeah, it's totally Bonnie and Clyde.
Total Bonnie and Clyde moment. And then the kid kind of cries.
Yeah.
And he cries a little louder. And then he screams.
Shatters all the windows.
Not only shatters the windows, but that huge water tank on
that's
top
right.
of the
It falls
building.
down.
Right.
So that actually was one of the things when they were making this film, because obviously it's all hand drawn, but there were some computer elements to it. And I guess that they used computers to calculate how things would fall
That's why it looks so amazing.
so that they could animate it better.
So they're dealing with the gravity and like all the particle physics.
Exactly.
Oh, that because it doesn't look like anything. Anytime you're seeing destruction in this movie, it looks completely like its own thing.
100%. Yeah.
That's such an interesting concept of going. I mean, it's 7 years before Pixar or whatever, or 7 years before Toy Story.
Yeah.
Of going like, well, we can't use this to animate our movie,
Right.
But we can use it to teach us things about how to hand draw it.
Yeah, that's
That's
exactly what it
super
was.
With all the unusual shit that's happened up to this point, this is the moment where you're like, okay, what is happening with this?
No,
kind
it's
of
so
like-
true because
right?
you're absolutely right, because you start with, okay, cool, I get it.
Yeah.
Seedy
Gangs.
Right.
really sick motorcycle chase. I'm in it.
Yeah.
But then the moment you see the weird looking kid, because you see him from far away first. Like
Right.
they do a really good job of setting it up where you're like, oh, there's this little person. You go, oh wait, he's sort of blue-gray. What's going on with
And
this?
he's old.
He's old.
Yeah.
And
right.
looks old.
Wrinkled.
What's going on with this kid? And then when he does actually speak and cry, you go, oh, it really is. It's a child. It's not some
Right.
weird, actually he's an old man kind of situation. And then, when he shatters all the windows and just causes all the destruction, you go, all right, this is going to be important in this movie.
Well, and then he disappears.
Yeah.
And then he disappears. And Kei, who's the character, young woman who we're going to get to know more, she sees him. We meet the colonel,
Yes.
who hears they've gone to the old city, and he is great design.
Yes.
I mean, this
Oh
is,
yeah.
I mean that, and this is something anime does so well, of like the huge, broad-shouldered, square-jawed dude.
Yeah.
And the colonel is fantastic.
Yeah, there's some shortcuts you can do when you're drawing people in a way that doesn't necessarily 100% resemble what people actually look like. Like, I think that's one of the things that is so fun and enjoyable about anime is the character design and how much that tells you about a character without them having to say anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we have a hard cut back into a chase. And we're with the clowns and they throw like a hand grenade in a tunnel and then Kaneda kind of gets away from it, and then there's the extinguishers that shoot foam down in the tunnel. Such a cool sci-fi idea. And Tetsuo comes through that foam, which is a fantastic shot, and he doesn't wait.
No.
He just keeps going because he wants to prove himself.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's been mocking him and making fun of him, and he's kind of messed up in the previous chase, which I don't think I mentioned. And he heads off, and we're off on some bridges. And we're into the restricted area, and there's riots going on, and the police are trying to put down the riots with tear gas, and there's gas everywhere. And we see this character Ryu, who we're going to get to know more. We see Kei, who disappears into the gas just as the soldiers come out. The problem I had with writing my notes, every shot is a fantastic shot.
Yeah.
And so I kept wanting to write down, well, this is cool, and this is cool.
Yeah, there's
and
not
this
a
is
wasted moment in this whole film.
Like the next thing that happens is, and they're random people, is the soldiers who came out of the gas, and some innocent guy comes out of the gas, and he hits him in the chest point blank with a gas canister. It's just like, oh my God. And then we're back to the chase.
Once again, I find this construction of it brilliant because there, like you said at the beginning, or we said, there's no pure person in this.
No.
So it's all about varying degrees of goodness and badness and morality and what have you. So when you've got soldiers who are shooting these protesters in the chest, point blank with tear gas canisters, how bad does Kaneda or Tetsuo or these other characters look in comparison?
Right, in comparison to these people who are supposed to be the sort of pillar of morality and upholding the law.
Exactly, the protect and serve situation, right? So all of it, I love that.
Really
Well,
Yeah, to what's going on now, or what we've experienced before. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Well, and it's like we can't trust the police. We're not trusting that colonel.
Yeah.
But then, later on, I'm not going to really trust Ryu and Kei, who are underground people.
Yeah.
Like they're terrorists essentially.
They're effectively terrorists.
right. They're in cahoots with a guy on the council. Who knows what his goals
Who's going to
are.
rob everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember in the comic, they're also connected to the religious fanatics, and all of them are fantasizing about Akira and whatever that means, and nobody knows what the fuck that means.
Yeah.
So everybody is acting based on something where that an unknown.
Yeah.
Like if an unknown is at the core of your moral principles are weak.
Yeah.
Know?
That's very true.
Or certainly malleable.
Yeah, exactly. But right now we're back into this car chase, and I love, again, it's little things, but there's the dude that Tetsuo is chasing, and he has a little turbo nitro something switch, and he hits that thing and almost loses it. And it's a great funny moment. There's another great funny moment where two guys separate. One guy goes down a ramp, and he goes, "No, don't go that." Explosion.
Yeah.
Again, that's great.
Yeah.
And the guy who's doing the turbo crashes, and Tetsuo comes up behind him full speed with some weapon in his hand.
I know, and he just hits him.
Yeah.
It's like
Right in the head.
Yeah.
And it
He
almost
knocks
looks
off
like,
his helmet for sure, but
there's a lot of blood.
It looks a little like, in a much more artistically executed fashion, the scene in Jason Takes Manhattan, where Jason just punches that kid's head off on the bridge.
I've never seen that particular bit of cinema.
It really should just be called Jason Takes a Boat Ride, because for most of it they're on a boat. They don't get to Manhattan until like the last 15 minutes of the movie.
That'll be a future Cine-Files episode. And Tetsuo is very proud of himself and looking back, and because he's looking back, he's not looking forward and doesn't see that kid the old kid who we now see has the number 26 written on his hand is right in front of him, and Tetsuo can't stop, and there is a crash, an explosion, but he doesn't crash into that kid. It is really beautiful, beautifully shot. Tetsuo is wounded, and Kaneda and the guys are kind of catching up. They show up, move kind of around the fire. And again, one of the things that this film does that I didn't remember seeing before, it plays with focus. Like in a normal film, depending on lensing, you're going to have characters in the foreground in focus, background out of focus, or vice versa. usually in animation, until the movie other than this that I remember really noticing is WALL-E. WALL-E's a film that loves, because Roger Deakins is the advisor on that, and loves to play with focus. And in this, it's like we have Kaneda in focus and the fire out of focus.
Yeah.
We're going to see that a lot, and that creates a sense of depth and isolation.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, it is a master craftsman at work. And Tetsuo is obviously really hurt, and the kid is backing away, and Kaneda is calling to that kid. It sees his weird face, and then a spotlight hits, and it's silent. And another one hits, silence. And another one, and then the spotlight sweeps up to Kaneda, and the moment it hits it, the sound arrives of the helicopters. Beautiful, beautiful filmic moment.
I think it just captures two, and this is certainly not the only film that it happens in, but that whole idea of it's a really interesting and correct translation of when something you don't expect happens in your own life.
Yeah.
Of you're sort of like
yeah.
out of your own body for a second.
Good
Like
point.
watching your own life, and that's how this scene feels.
Right.
That's a totally good point. And one of the things, we talk about it in film school is, are we being objective or are we being subjective? This is a subjective moment. This is how Kaneda is experiencing this moment.
Yep.
Yeah. And the playing with sound and sound design is just beautiful in this film. And that weird kid tries to run away, and another weird-looking kid in some floating wheelchair thing.
Oh, yeah.
This is badass. The floating throne thing over the chair, like it's badass.
Yeah, and it's throughout the whole film. Like it keeps coming back in the movie.
And you're tempted to think that this kid is like the leader of this whole thing and whatever because of the way he's sitting in the suit and everything, but that does not prove to be true.
Well, and we go like, oh, is he the enemy of the kid?
Right.
He's saying you can't go away.
Is there a battle between the two? Yeah.
I definitely had that moment. I remember watching it the first time of being like, oh, is this the villain?
Yeah, well, this is the thing about this. Well, like, because you can watch it and go like, oh, the colonel has these 3 innocent kids held captive.
I
But
know,
then
but
they don't really want,
and also like, and we'll talk about it later when we get into it, but he actually has a pretty nice relationship with the kids, aside from the whole they're in a government scientific experiment program that's messing around with their heads, but he has affection for these kids.
I think so. I'm with you. I turned around much more on the colonel watching this time. Maybe it's because I'm old, but it also is because I look at I believe the colonel is 100% believes he's doing the right thing.
Or
is trying to do the right thing.
Absolutely believes he's doing the right, and exactly, he's trying his best to do the right thing.
He does not have selfish motives in any way. Now, what he is doing might very well not be the right thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've now watched this movie probably 10 to 15 times. I don't know what the right thing is.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a right thing. But at this moment, what they want to do is get this kid back. Yeah. And we also see that Tetsuo is injured, and so they're going to take him away, and Kaneda doesn't like that. And he's trying to talk to them. He's trying to, in his sassy way, and man, they slam his face to the ground. And I love when he forces his head up to look.
Yeah.
It's a great shot.
There's a lot of face smashing into pavement in this movie.
People bleed a lot.
They do. There's a lot of blood in this movie.
And he gets one glimpse of that colonel before the helicopter flies away. And the colonel's looking at the 2 kids in the helicopter. And then we cut to Tetsuo. I think this is such an interesting moment. Tetsuo's in the helicopter. He's unconscious. He's on a bed. And then as the music rises, the background of the helicopter fades away, and we see Tetsuo floating over Neo-Tokyo. What do you think that means? What is the filmmaker telling us?
I mean, it's kind of a parallel with what ends up happening later, I think, in the film. Of this whole idea of, you're being set up for, and especially, this is something that I think they get a lot, but they do get a lot more into in the manga, is the whole sort of Emperor Tetsuo thing where he, has this newfound power, and suddenly now he was in a situation wherein everybody was always putting him down, and now he's, rising up above everybody else and can literally float because of his awakening psychic powers.
For me, I almost like Daredevil getting his sensory powers suddenly feels all this stuff in the city.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of, I feel like his consciousness is spreading out in some way.
I think,
because what we are going to find out is that his encounter with the weird kid has which is Takashi, I think, has activated some latent superpowers, some mutant powers in him.
Well, yeah, that's what I think. It's the beginning of it, right? So it's going to show that initially, not fully explored yet or realized yet, but it's the beginning of it. This feeling of being in and out, even while unconscious.
Yeah.
We're talking to some cops. They've
Oh
seen
my
gang
God.
guys like this before. And
This is such a good scene.
they're kind of talking their way out of it. And this is clearly not the first time. No. They have been through this. They are, and what's so funny is they show, it's not that they show no respect. It's they show occasionally the illusion of some minor respect to get what they want and then are complete rebels the whole rest of the time.
Yeah.
You know? And they managed to Kaneda manages to talk his way out of this situation.
I mean, yes, but also it boils down to the cops going, these guys are too stupid to be involved in what we're actually looking for.
Exactly.
Right.
But then right as they leave, they're like, oh no, we have one more person.
Yes.
We have our friend, which is Kei,
Yeah.
which is the girl that we saw earlier, saw Takashi disappear. And they go, yes, she's with us. And they managed to get her outside.
Yeah, because they were just so annoyed with
Yeah.
them at that point and wanted them to leave.
One more
We
totally.
called him an old man.
They call him an old man.
25 years old.
Yeah. And I'm not even married.
And one other completely bizarre little bit is there's some dude going, long live the revolution,
Oh my God,
who
with
they're
the
beating the crap
grenade.
out, pulls out a grenade.
Tries to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Grenade, fire shoots out, smoke shoots out. Nothing.
Nothing.
Dud. And then they beat the shit out of him.
Yeah.
We're outside, and we talk about the weird kid, and we talk about Tetsuo, and we don't know what hospital he's in. But Kaneda's talking to Kei.
What I meant was maybe we can go for drinks somewhere around here.
And this is the stuff that is like this times 10 in the comic book.
Yeah.
Of him being a dog. And she's not having any of it. And then she leaves. He tries to chase her. Giant truck gets in the way. He doesn't catch up with him. And in the last moment, in the background, the giant building, explosion.
Yeah.
Because that grenade ended up going off.
Yeah.
That's a great little comic beat.
Yeah.
If you find horrible slaughter of innocent people comic,
Yeah,
Which I
it's
do.
definitely played for comedy.
it's
in
played
this, though.
totally for comedy.
You say innocent.
It is a police station.
We're beating him up.
Yeah.
Well, and there are criminals and horrible cops, so we're not too innocent.
Right. No one's innocent in this thing.
Colonel's hearing with some president of government something that there might be a mole in executive council. There's talk about politics. There's talk about him not being popular. There's talk about his lack of judgment, and that's all of that.
Yep.
Off with Tetsuo. Again, the design of the scanner that he is floating in with those wheels spinning and tilting, it's so cool.
Don't forget the Bantha tube that Vader is in, right? Like there's
yeah.
like Luke is in rather when he's in that thing. So there's influence
in
here,
the, like,
possibly.
Bacta tank?
Yeah, in the back
Yeah.
of tank, right?
Yeah.
There's influence here.
Sure.
That's the 70s. So
Yeah.
there's influence here.
Now the Colonel's talking to some doctor, and we're talking about his pattern. And this is where we see that one CG effect.
Yes.
Which is the little display that
Yeah.
they're looking at. The little
the
spherical.
brain waves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Colonel, please observe. It's the special pattern I'm getting from that young man. It doesn't resemble any like I've seen so far. And I've never seen a developmental speed or configuration like this. It may have begun with the shock of contact with number 26, or it could be...
Have you finished running the comparison against Akira's pattern?
I'll superimpose for you.
And we're talking something about Akira and his pattern. Are these patterns the same? And maybe we could learn about the patterns. And I, in 1989, is going, what the hell is this stuff? What's happening?
Is it safe, Doctor?
I will take care of it.
No! I wasn't talking about the boy at all. I'm asking that if he turns out to reach a power like Akira's, are you positive that you are able to control such a power?
And the doctor goes, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. Yeah, but also they do have a conversation, though, of basically being like, can you control this, but really, and at what cost, you know?
Well, this is like... we never get to find out exactly what they know or exactly what the plan is or what happened with Akira or how we got. I mean, we get little hints.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do they want? Because the rebels and the religious fanatics, they believe that Akira is the Messiah or is going to...
He's like their own personal genius.
Right. And we get the sense that the Colonel doesn't want Akira to wake up because we're worried about another singularity.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's always the way that I interpreted it.
So what is it that they want from Tetsuo? Like this is where
Yeah, because it's like,
what
why
are you trying
if
to
they
do?
thought that he had the same sort of brain patterns as Akira,
Yeah.
why didn't they just kill him to
Yeah.
prevent the return?
Well, I think with Tetsuo, first of all, it's an accident that
Right.
it
It
is an
happens.
accident, yes.
And second of all, if you're going to have someone like Akira, why not have someone that you can control possibly to go against Akira in case?
In case
Maybe.
it
So
does
that's
happen.
I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
that's because I mean they got the kids in there, so if they get
Right.
him
That's
administrated,
true,
yeah.
then you've got yourself a little bit of contention.
Well, and
or,
it seems
you know,
like the
competitor.
colonel's agenda and the doctor's agenda are not the same. The doctor wants to follow whatever the thing is
As a
'cause
scientist would.
he's the
Sure.
crazy scientist who's
Right.
like,
Right.
this is awesome and doesn't think of the consequences. And the colonel, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's kind of what you said.
And these are the old school Japanese monster tropes. You always have the scientist who's like, "No, don't kill Godzilla."
Oh, yeah.
right. And then you have the military. No, we have to kill Godzilla. And it's like,
Right.
no, there's something to
And
explore
I
here.
think that's one of
It's
the
same
things
thing.
that's kind of great about the Colonel as a character, though, is that he is kind of somewhere in between because he
Yes.
says that if it starts to get out of hand, then like you gotta kill him.
Yeah.
But I felt watching it, at least this time around, I'm totally with you that I was suddenly like really on board with the Colonel.
This is what happens when you get older. When you start to see there's a bigger picture
Yeah.
than just like the rebellion. Like, don't step on my rights. It's like
Exactly.
No, there's a bigger picture
Yes.
here. You got to think about it. So,
and
yeah.
and I
Well, and
again,
Tokyo's already been destroyed once.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And I certainly got the impression that while the Colonel said that, he didn't want them to kill Tetsuo.
Right,
It was very
right.
much if it's necessary, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the military side of him coming out. But he is not without like empathy for these kids.
Certainly.
I think the school that Kaneda and his friends go to is excellent.
I would hate to teach there, but sure.
I used to tour with the Children's Theater Company, and I worked in some kind of impoverished areas with the Boys and Girls Club, and man, this took me right back.
I mean,
Yeah, in all the worst ways, I guess. Yeah.
The camera goes past these different rooms, which are covered in garbage and graffiti and,
Yeah.
horribleness. And then we go to the principal's office where the gym teacher gives them some discipline,
Yeah.
one at a time in the face with a lot of blood.
Discipline! 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 Dismissed!
All I could think was, this is not a good way to teach them lessons.
And it's this mix of yes, sir, and total sass.
Yeah.
And because they walk out yelling about it, and they get out of the school and their girls come up,
Yeah.
which are clearly the girls that follow this gang.
Yes.
One of the kids is still spitting up blood.
But also, again, once again, before we leave the school, once again, it's another institution that's corrupt
totally
and
totally.
broken down, and
Well, and this is what goes to like Easy Rider and
Right.
these films of the late
absolutely.
60s and early 70s of
Yes.
like the generation who's supposed to be in charge has completely failed in their responsibility to kids, and so kids therefore feel no responsibility towards the institutions in which they live.
Yeah.
And that's clearly what because while we can be somewhat judgmental about this gang and Kaneda, what choice do they have?
Right. Right.
Like they, who's teaching them to do anything other than what they're doing?
yeah.
100%.
And we meet Kaori, who is a young-looking girl who is maybe Tetsuo's girlfriend or has a relationship with him of some kind.
Yeah.
And she's genuinely worried about him, and they are all talking about him being a moron and an idiot. And
Here's the thing I can pull back. She is the only
Totally.
good character in
Yes.
the whole
Yeah.
film. That's my
Yep.
mistake. She's the only one, and
Totally
she gets
pure.
mistreated by everybody all the way to the end, which is horrible.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she walks away. They're all going off to do their young gang member boy-girl stuff, and she walks away sad.
Yeah.
There's a nurse in a hallway in a hospital, and Tetsuo is gone.
By the way, fuck Kanye West for this, because he uses this whole thing for Stronger.
Oh, really?
And now,
he
and when
does.
which is an homage to Akira, right? It's an homage to the film.
Yeah.
So now I have like I have like I'm trying to connect everything.
like
as I'm
dichotomy
watching.
of
Yeah, because it's one of my favorite music videos, but like it ruins the movie a little bit for me because I'm trying to piece it as it is in the video versus as it is in the movie.
I never thought of all the advantages I have of being totally uncool and completely non-conversant in anything recent.
It's pretty awesome of Kanye to reference it in this, but then
totally.
again, it ruins at times the aesthetic when I watch the movie this time. So it was interesting.
Kaori's at a laundromat, and there's a scene with a girl talking on the phone, and we're up on a rooftop, and there's Tetsuo.
When I woke up, I was on an operating table or something. And that examination, it's like they were messing around inside my head. No, I don't want to go back there again. We'll run away.
Where would we go to?
I don't know. Someplace far away.
Back at school, there's not even any teachers. I love one of the gang members who I think is Yamagata is going, but I want to learn. I like a vocation. Yeah.
That's very common in anime. Even when there are teachers, there's rarely classes. Like, unless it is specifically an anime about learning a thing. Like,
Right.
if it's just an anime that takes place in a school, like, they're in class, but they're never, like, in class.
Frankly, I think that's true of almost all things set in schools. I mean, how much time do we really spend on multiplication tables
exactly.
or parts of speech?
Yeah.
But we're not going to stay in that classroom long anyway because they look out the window and Tetsuo is stealing the bike.
Yeah.
The bike.
The bike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's off riding with Kaori, and immediately that bike stops because he didn't handle it right. And
Like Canada warned him.
yeah,
It's built
so
for
you
him.
can't handle that thing. And it's okay. There's some other motorcycles coming. Oh, those aren't our motorcycles.
Yeah. Rival gang.
And it's funny because this not funny, haha, is that the Kaori gets a punch in the face, which is very reminiscent of exactly what Tetsuo did to the guy that he hit, because it's someone riding up on a motorcycle and clocking her.
Yeah.
And then Tetsuo's on the ground, and they lift up like a pipe or something to hit him, and we do a wipe, which again is it's obviously a George Lucas thing,
Sure.
but really it's a Akira Kurosawa thing.
Yes.
You know. And Kaneda and our guys are looking for them, but they don't find them really
Right
in
away.
time,
Yeah.
and we get to what they call payback. And the first payback is on the girl, and this is just, they rip her shirt off and they punch her, and it is
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
Because she's 13, 14.
Yeah, probably. Because I think, like, all
Kaneda's supposed
like
to be 15.
I was like all anime heroes, I believe they're all supposed to be 15. So yeah, she's only supposed to be like 14, probably.
I mean, yeah, it's awful.
But once again, it's a brutal world.
It's a
right?
brutal world.
It's uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable, and it's
a
interesting because
verification.
I've certainly had a lot of conversations with other young women watching this film and how they feel about this scene. And I mean, yeah, of course it bothers me, but it's meant to. They're not glorifying
it's
it.
not exploitive.
It's not. It's not exploitive by any stretch of the imagination, and it's also, you could argue that it's being done to further Tetsuo's story, but at the same time, there's a lot of other elements in terms of what is propelling Tetsuo to ultimately become the way that he is. And I don't, since we're talking about the film, it's like we don't want to get too much into the manga, but like the character of Kaori is like such an it's interesting to look at her role in the film versus her role in the manga. Because in a lot of ways it's identical, but in the anime, they have a previous relationship with one another, as you say. Like she is his girlfriend, or they certainly have
Friendly,
they certainly have an attachment to one another. And so she kind of represents like the last vestiges of his humanity, and his ability to kind of stay connected with the people that he cared about. Versus in the manga, where she's introduced after he's already become like Emperor Tetsuo. But he still, within that, manages to form this attachment
bond,
to
yeah.
her. And so again, but that is more of like, oh, there is still some humanity in him because he's able to form this new attachment. So it's interesting.
The one thing I'll say is that, in my opinion, in my expert opinion, filmically, there is more weight put to the threat to Kaneda's bike than there is to the threat to the girl.
Yeah.
His reaction is not, if you hit her again, I'm going to kill you. His reaction, if you scratch that bike,
if you scratch that bike, I'll kill you.
That is a very good point. And that struck me watching it this time as well. Like, this is what he values, and not necessarily the relationship, unfortunately,
with the girl.
With Kara, yeah. But I will say, to your point, Emma, too, when they rip off her shirt, the camera doesn't zoom in on her breasts, or it isn't made a big deal out of. She's full, and the shot of her with her puffed eye, it's terrible.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's rough.
Fortunately, our guys are showing up.
Yeah.
And Kaneda's on the back of a bike, and the clowns start to scramble. Most of the guys are going one way, and the other guy turns towards our guys, and Kaneda jumps off the moving bike.
Without breaking both his legs.
Runs straight at a dude on a motorcycle, leaps up, steps on the front fender, jump kicks the guy in the head, and kicks him off the motorcycle.
Yeah.
That is cool.
It is.
I mean, I know cool, and that is a cool move.
Oh yeah, I think that some of it too. The reason that the action sequences in this resonate as being so cool is that they're so, for the most, except when you get into the stuff with the espers, but like it all is based in reality, but it's just it's animated, so they're able to push it just a little bit to stuff that people can't actually do.
Frankly, I think if you look at fight choreography in Marvel movies today, this is what they're doing.
Yeah,
totally. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's later. Kaori's bloody and wearing a coat, and Tetsuo is beating the crap out of the biker.
You're gonna kill him, Tetsuo! You want that?
I want him more than dead. I'll split his friggin' head open!
And then, man, this scene gets weird. First, it starts with a theme we're going to have a lot, which is Tetsuo not wanting Kaneda to tell him what to do.
Yes, not wanting him to save him. That's
Don't
that's
save
the
me.
exact phrase he constantly uses.
And then his head starts to hurt. And there's some quick flashes, including images of the crazy mutant insanity from the end of the film.
Yeah.
We hear the bells that are associated in terms of like a leitmotif with Akira.
Akira!
And all the guys are like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Right. There's weird blue light coming out of his head.
Akira! I don't know who that is!
He drops down to his knees, and he looks down at the ground, and the ground starts to break away. And he falls through the earth. And then he's back on his knees, almost as if he's landed back in the same spot. And then all of his guts fall out on the ground.
Yep. This is where you start getting into the body horror.
This is what I think about with you as 14 watching this stuff.
I'm trying to remember if I had already seen like Ninja Scroll and Demon City Shinjuku, all of which also have a lot of body horror kind of stuff in them, because that's pretty common in Japanese sort of horror adjacent titles.
Right.
But yeah, I was pretty disturbed by that.
And as disturbing as that, in some ways, the shot of their perspective of what's happening, which is that his guts have not fallen out, but he is still trying to put his
it back.
intestines back
It's such
in.
a good shot.
Yeah.
It's so great. And then there's more flashes, and he staggers, and now we find out that, they're being monitored. The doctor's in a big van. They come around the corner.
Yeah,
they
they're
pick
right
him
there.
up. They're immediately giving Tetsuo shots. Again, Kaneda's like, what are you doing with my friends? And standing in front of him. Classic anime, ginormous man in black with shoulders about 5 feet wide. And Kaneda is not getting anywhere near Tetsuo. And they take him away, and we see that bandage blowing towards the bike after they're gone. And the colonel's there too. We're hanging out with our girls again. Kaneda is not paying much attention to them.
No.
They're like, let's just get out of here. And then there is a big giant explosion, and out of the smoke of the big giant explosion come Ryu and Kei, because they are, as we said before, terrorists.
Yeah.
And Kaneda sees the girl and goes, in.
Yeah. Hey, man.
Again, I think in the film, he just comes across as kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Like, I totally agree with you that he's way more smarmy and just kind of a jackass in the manga, whereas in the anime, like truly, he's just like, oh, there's that girl I kind of have a thing
You know
for.
what I think he's that? I think he has a dumb kind of genius.
Yeah.
Because he is dumb.
Yeah.
But in moments of action, where he has to be decisive, he
totally.
I'm doing this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm going to get this laser gun. I'm going to jump on this thing. He's like he is impulsive and decisive and heroic in this totally bizarre way.
Yeah.
And slightly entitled.
Definitely.
Right? 'Cause he
Definitely entitled.
Yeah, he thinks he can call her his girlfriend. They haven't even like gone out to coffee once.
Yeah.
Well,
And, yeah.
I would say for a kid who has had as many things go wrong for him as I believe that Kaneda has, he's had just about everything go right for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He is the leader
He's
everywhere
having a
he goes.
good day.
Yeah. Well, and for his whole life, he has been the guy who's been able to win under these terrible circumstances.
Yeah.
Because there's no question that he's the leader of the gang.
Right.
Oh,
I mean, he
yeah.
is like, they all like, no, you are the leader. Absolutely. There's something about a rendezvous point, and Kei is heading one way, and then there's the army, and we're having fire with the army, and we're down in sort of sewer-y sort of areas.
Yeah.
And she's got two guys coming after her, and she's got a gun, and she is got dead to rights, and down the side wall. Again, Kaneda is just a stud. Comes running down this wall, tackles one of the guys, and then she shoots the other guy in the face. Nasty. And he goes down, and she's pretty much in shock. Back at the hospital, Tetsuo is flashing back to childhood, and we see him saying goodbye to someone, probably his father, and we hear this flute music again. Now the music is really traditional Japanese kind of sound, and he looks up, he looks down, there's another boy who we might think is Kaneda, and the city starts to fall apart, and he looks down, and the world below him starts to fall apart, everywhere except where Kaneda is standing. And it comes up onto the thing that he's standing on, and it slowly self-destructs, and his feet that are standing on the structure that is just falling apart, his feet begin falling apart, and his legs begin falling apart, and his hands begin falling apart, and he yells out to Kaneda. And then he wakes up.
It's a nice foreshadowing of what's going to happen in the stadium later, but it's also the destruction of their friendship. The friendship is changing.
Sure.
And like the foundation of what his world was is crumbling away.
Yeah.
The foundation of his own ability to control his body is slowly starting to fall away as well and fall apart. And so these are moments to kind of like subtly show you what's happening here in these relationships. I think it's brilliant because it's done because you're so caught up in seeing these images that he's caught up in that maybe it'll take you 2 or 3 views to realize, oh, this is a little bit of symbolism about what is actually happening with his connection to Kaneda, which is it's crumbling away and it's changing and it's evolving into something else completely.
Yeah.
I love everything you just said, and I just had another thought too.
Yeah.
Which is we now know how old Katushio Ottomo was, is that he was born 9 years after the destruction, 9 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
So he grew up with the stories of the world could be destroyed. I think Kaneda and Tetsuo are almost exactly that age. If they were born, so they were born 16 years after the destruction of Tokyo.
Yes.
And so they grew up with the story, because imagine if you grew up with the stories of the world is fragile. The world could be destroyed at a moment's notice. And so in Tetsuo's mind, as he's reckoning with all of the things that are happening, what he sees is the destruction of city as the destruction, as you said, of his relationship with Kaneda.
Yeah.
Because that's what he grew up with.
Yeah.
We're in what I can only describe as the nursery. This giant, huge room that's like taking all the platonic ideal of the childhood space and magnifying it to this massive degree with huge planes hanging from the ceiling and dragons and artwork and all this stuff. And we're talking to a little girl, number 25, Kyoko, wearing makeup and lipstick and in this bed, and she's had a dream.
It was a dream that I saw.
A dream?
The city started to crumble apart, covered by a big shadow. And lots of people died. And the 3 of us, we get to meet Akira again.
What? Akira?
The city will crumble. So many people, so many will die.
When will it happen? Do you know when? Kyoko!
You mustn't let that boy go. His power,
And I think she's saying, and you got to stop him, you know?
The city goes black.
Yeah. And the doctor says, well, her precognitive ability is well established.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't mentioned is there's something going on at the site of the next Olympics, which is opening up in 147 days.
Randomly. An Olympics.
Olympics. Isn't that funny? Because where are the Olympics taking place next year?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be the 2020 Olympics
In Tokyo.
in Neo Tokyo.
That is great. So is there something buried underneath the Olympic Stadium
Listen,
that we should worry about?
I'm not discounting it because, again, this movie definitely gets some things right.
Well, in this case, the colonel and the doctor, they got to put on the cold gear and they go down that elevator. Again, the design, enough said.
Yep.
Go watch the movie. You'll see
One
what
of
we're
my
talking
favorite
about.
sequences when they go down.
I love them going down. What I don't understand, and it's the only thing in it that I think makes no sense at all, is within them going down in an elevator, we cut to them in another elevator in a flashback, I guess, where he's talking to the doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And they have this random conversation, and then we dissolve back to. I was like, why didn't you just have the conversation here? Like, why go to this
you
other.
didn't need it to be a conversation in a different elevator at a different time. Like, just,
It's really
just talk
strange.
about it.
I think it's probably the conversation when they first put Akira down there.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's before he's going back to that.
I think so. Or it's, I don't know when it is, but certainly what they're talking about is risk. That scientists are romantics. Soldiers think about managing risks.
Yeah.
And he talks about like it took 30 years to rebuild the city, and now the city's going to hell.
Right.
And it seems like the colonel likes the spirit of rebuilding and the spirit of progress, but look at what all that progress has led to is a whole bunch of crap.
Now it's just a garbage heap made up of a bunch of hedonistic fools.
Which, from everything we've seen, that seems pretty darn accurate.
But in spite of that, you're trying to save the city.
I'm not a scientist. I think like a soldier.
And we're back on the platform, and we find out that it is really cold, and they start talking about this room is 128 degrees Kelvin, and this room is 114, and this room is 50. And it's like, man, this is getting really cold. And the inner chamber is like 0.00005 Kelvin. And the colonel says, open the door. Now, I know a little bit about Kelvin. You die. I don't care what kind of coat you're wearing. You're dead. But we open up the door, and it's this massive structure with joints and locks and beams and cracking ice and steam coming off in it. Looks really cool. Again, check out the movie. And we see in there the giant Akira containment, whatever it is.
It's like a cryogenic chamber.
I think there's a number, too.
Yeah, because he is number 28.
28.
Which comes from, maybe you know about it, there's another manga, which is Tetsuo 28 or something like that?
Yeah, Tetsuo 28 Go.
Yeah. Yeah. And that apparently, Katushio Ottomo was a huge fan of it, and a lot of the naming conventions came out of that. But I've never read it.
I haven't read it either. I'm familiar with its existence.
Right.
That's some old school stuff right there.
Yeah. It would have to be. Kaneda and Kei, she is still in shock. And it's funny.
God.
I think his line is like, first time you ever kill a guy?
Oh, yeah. He has this whole pep talk to her of like, oh, well, if you've never killed anybody before, like, we could totally just run away together. It'll be fine.
and what is your deal with that guy Ryu anyway?
Yeah,
I love how she slid that in there in her shock, in her
know.
moments of shock. Dudes are shameless. Dudes are shameless. Let's just put that. By the way, the number 28 symbolizes balance, harmony, service to others, empathy, adaptability, divine life purpose, and soul mission. So it's interesting. Knowledge and wisdom as well. So I wonder if that factored into it as well.
And of course, just as we're talking about Ryu, who comes up, but a whole bunch of guys
Yes.
pull guns on Kaneda, throw him into some room and lock the door.
Yep.
And now we hear that they've got some plan to sneak into the lab, and they've got stuff from Mr. Meizu. We don't know who that is yet, I don't think. And you hear about Tetsuo, and then we hear a noise because Kaneda is up in the ventilation shaft, and they pull him down, and he goes like, I should go with you because I'm Tetsuo's friend.
Oh, yeah. He specifically says that, if they're going to kill Tetsuo, then like they should be the ones to do it because like he's their friend.
Yeah. And he was there when it happened.
Yeah.
All right.
And apparently they're going to go along with this.
Yeah. They just go, okay. Sounds good.
And now we meet Mr. Meizu, who is another classic kind of anime design.
Totally. Like just smarmy little dude.
Yeah, 3 feet tall with long, greasy hair.
Oh, he's so gross.
Pale skin, greasy skin. Yeah.
Yep.
Neo Tokyo is going to change soon. In all respects, this city is saturated. It's like an overripe fruit, and buried within it is a new seed. We need only wait for the wind, which will make it fall to fruition. The wind called Akira.
So this thing is that here we're now starting to hear that Akira, whatever he is, because we certainly don't know, is part of their plan. That the plan of these rebels is that somehow the arrival of Akira will bring about this new age. But we don't know why they think that.
Yeah.
No.
You know, or what they know about Akira. And certainly from what I know about him from having watched the movie, that's not true.
Definitely not. And I think that is a lot of the point of the film is there is a level, I think, in this of them kind of challenging people putting a lot of faith and belief in something that they cannot see and don't actually know about.
Well, and I
the
think
second coming.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point because I think I think humans do that in big and small ways. Certainly the second coming being big ways, but also in this person, politician, whatever, they're going to solve my problems.
Yes.
And over and over and over again, we all of our experiences, nothing actually solves your problems. Our problems are rarely solved. We might be improved upon.
Yeah.
But it ain't going to be solved. And yet each time we kind of look at the next thing and go, oh, no, this will do it. This one's going to really do it. And the other group, these are the sort of terrorist political group. They're not the religious fanatics. Right near them, like down below them, they see the actual religious people who are chanting, and there's a woman who's a much, much bigger part in the book, in the comics.
Yes.
And we hear the traditional sounds, and there's something very dissonant about their chanting that's sort of intense and powerful. And there's a dude with a giant paintbrush painting in red. And he's writing, the time of Akira's awakening is nigh.
Yeah.
And that just the image of that red, and I think that red is the exact shade of red of Tetsuo's cape later on.
Yeah.
You know, is that's just the use of color control and the power. And you know, it's like, what are the iconic things in this movie? The motorcycle, the cape, the red paint, blood. Like all these things are iconically powerful within that particular shade of red.
And I also think the religious fanatics here are hearkening back to the older Japanese culture, right? With the large kimono and the huge hair.
Oh, yeah.
It's going back to those old times of the samurai time. So it's the bathing and the way what Akira is going to do is bring us back to a time that we were more powerful or equal or whatever. It's interesting.
The time of atonement is upon us! Are your hearts prepared? The time is nigh! The moment of Lord Akira's awakening is drawing closer! Are your hearts and minds prepared for a new dawning?
Holding meetings here is prohibited! This gathering is illegal!
So as police battle protesters and religious fanatics in Neo-Tokyo, Kaneda has joined a terrorist organization that is breaking into a government building in order to rescue Tetsuo, who lies in a bed writhing in agony as his mind and body begin to change. And all of them are on a collision course with something far beyond their ability to comprehend. Something called Akira.